Hey, what's up you guys, and welcome to another cookie cutter Pokemon challenge.
You stole this idea from Johnstone.
What?
You heard me. You stole this idea from Johnstone.
Well, yes, but not really. See these recordings right here? See this community post right here? All of them were made before Johnstone posted this video, so fuck off, kid.
Oh. Okay.
Anyway, before even starting this video, I want to say, at the end of this video I want to talk about the cookie cutter part. If you want, just stick around for that, and otherwise then don't. So this Pokemon challenge trend has been popping for a while, and every video is pretty much the same. You know what you're gonna click on. They're gonna use a single Pokemon, they all use goddamn health items such as leftovers and stuff, they allow TMs and HMs, and before even clicking on the video you already know they're gonna complete it. I've always approached these videos with the mindset that I wanted to do something that was actually challenging, which is exactly why I failed the Sunkern challenge. And this time is no different. After thinking for a couple of days, I came up with the most ridiculous set of rules to take on Pokemon Diamond, which is arguably one of the most difficult Pokemon games. I'm gonna assume you can all see and you can all read, so you already kind of know the rules because I wanted to put it in the thumbnail, but I'm still gonna go over them one by one. So like I said, this is a Nuzlocke, which brings me to rule number 1, which is I can catch one Pokemon per route, and once I catch it, it's pretty much done. I can catch no more Pokemon that route for the entire run. And you know the rules with the Nuzlocke, once a Pokemon dies, it dies and I can't use it anymore forever. But a regular Nuzlocke was way too easy for me, which brings me to rule number 2. I cannot ever heal any Pokemon I catch. And with ever, I actually mean ever. This includes Pokemon centers, potions, healing health items such as leftovers, healing moves such as Giga Drain, you name it, literally everything, I cannot heal. There are a couple of exceptions though, such as the Aterna Forest, where your Pokemon get healed to full health, but once we get there I'll explain how I'm gonna counter that. But with no healing, I actually mean no healing. And I don't just mean health. I mean PP as well. I will not heal any PP of the Pokemon I catch. I can only use the PP for a certain amount of times, and once it reaches 0, I can never use it again. I either have to replace the Pokemon, or if it runs out of all 4 moves, I just have to bench it. Because there's no use anymore other than for struggling. And then you're probably like, okay, that rule isn't that difficult, you can use TMs and HMs to replace those moves that you emptied. That brings me to rule number 3. I will not be using any TMs and HMs. I wanted to make this as hard as possible, so I'm just gonna use the regular movesets the Pokemon actually learn. And that includes the move relearner, because at some point in their lifespan, the Pokemon I catch learn those moves. So it's not using TMs or HMs, it's actually using their moves, it's actually using their true power. And I think it's pretty obvious that my Pokemon can only relearn their moves once, because otherwise I could just exploit it by relearning the same moves over and over again. And with this rule, it should be pretty clear that I will be using HM slaves, because otherwise, without using TMs and HMs, I can't even complete the game. I can't even get past the first couple of gyms. Talking about moves, that brings me to rule number 5. I will not use any bullshit moves that hinder my opponent from hitting me. This includes moves such as Mud Slap, Attract, Minimize, Thunder Wave, anything that makes it harder for the opponent to hit me. I will not be using that. I will pretty much be using damaging moves only. And then, last but not least, and this is a rule I just wanted to make for the fuck of it, I will not be using any save states. I know this shouldn't really be a rule and I don't really consider it a rule, but I just wanted to make this as hard as possible, so if anything goes wrong I'll just reset the entire battle, instead of just resetting to my save state. So those are pretty much the rules I will be using in the challenge. I will not be healing anything ever. So without further ado, let's get started. And this already brought me to the first annoying part of this entire video. I had no idea what starter to pick. Because I was only gonna be using a certain amount of PP, it meant I had to avoid trainers, and that meant I was gonna be underleveled for pretty much every important battle. After contemplating which starter Pokemon to pick for a long ass while, I decided to pick Piplup because I figured it would be the most beneficial Pokemon to pick to tackle the first 2 to 3 gyms. After picking Piplup, before even being able to do anything, I decided to just battle some Starlies and get a few levels, because on your way to the first gym there's a couple of trainers you're supposed to battle, and I was heavily underleveled, so I would be taking a lot of damage. These wild Starlies use Growl a lot, and thus I was able to take 0 damage and get Piplup up a couple of levels. I trained Piplup to level 8, after which it learned Bubble, which was gonna be a really useful move, especially against the first gym. And then, after obtaining my first 5 Pokeballs, I decided to catch my first Pokemon of the entire run, Starly. I know this seems like a really weird decision, but my rival picked Turtwig and I really had nothing against it. So I figured it was in my best interest to catch a Starly and then wing attack it to death. The route to Jubilife City really wasn't that interesting, except for the fact that there are a couple of unavoidable trainers, and my Piplup got taken down to 17 HP once it reached level 11. Once I reached Jubilife City, I immediately went up north to Route 204 and caught a Budew. I know this is a Pokemon that is loved by many, but I was only gonna be using it as a sacrifice. I'm not sorry at all, okay? After that, I used Route 204 to level up my Starly to level 9, because it learned Wing Attack at that point. The reason for doing this is because once you leave Jubilife City, you immediately get into a rival battle. And Piplup couldn't do shit against my rival's Turtwig, and neither could Budew because it was
level 4.
Basically what I'm trying to say is the start of this run was basically just me grinding my ass off to get anything done at all. Then it was time. I left Jubilife City and I was challenged by my rival. My rival had a Starly and a Turtwig at this point, and I knew sending out Starly would be the best option, since I still needed Piplup to defeat the first gym with. He started with his own Starly, and after just 2 quick attacks it was down, but in the process it had already damaged me to 9 HP. Then he sent out the entire reason I even caught this Starly in the first place, his Turtwig. I accidentally pressed quick attack and luckily Turtwig used withdraw. After this I figured wing attack would kill, but I was completely wrong because of his withdraw. He was able to get a tackle off and Starly almost took the L already. He was left at 3 HP. Luckily Starly is fast as fuck and he was able to finish Turtwig off. But because my own rules didn't allow me to heal Starly at any point in the game, I was disappointed that Starly was already at such low health. Luckily the remainder of the opponents on this route are pretty easy to defeat and I was able to level up Starly to level 11 without any problems. After obtaining Rock Smash, we already arrived at our first gym battle. At this point you might have already noticed something's missing. If you've seen any of my other Pokemon challenges, then you should know that my signature thing is using Rule 34 pictures. However, because I can't heal PP in this challenge, it is kind of necessary to show it on screen, because otherwise I can just cheat my way out of this challenge. This really sucks because I can't really express that I'm a man of culture, but at this point you should know that anyway. So I hope it's fine that they're not included for just once. There's simply no room for it in this layout. I'm so sorry, okay? Anyway, Bubble was able to one-hit KO Roark's minions, and I was able to level up Piplup to level 13. But I figured this wasn't gonna be enough, because Roark's Pokemon are super defensive, and Bubble wouldn't be able to KO them at such a low level. It's not like I had an option though, so I challenged him either way. Roark first sent out the Geodude, and I knew I was gonna one-shot this, because I one-shot his minions Geodudes without a problem as well. Thanks to this free experience, Piplup leveled up to level 14, and thus I was at least gonna be doing a little bit more damage against his final 2 Pokemon. Then Roark sent out an Onix, and I figured I wasn't gonna KO this in one hit, because Onix is bulky as fuck. On top of that, Onix turned out to be faster than me, and he was able to get a few hit points of damage with Rock Throw. And just like I thought, Bubble wasn't able to KO. But Roark's AI used a potion in the turn after that, and thus I was able to get a free 2-shot anyway. 18 hit points left, 1 poke to go. And Onix gave me so much experience that I even leveled up to level 15, at which Piplup learned back. Then it was time for his final Pokemon, Cranidos. I thought I didn't stand a chance against this guy, because it has a really high attack stat, and it has such bulky defense stats that Bubble was never gonna KO this in any way, shape or form. Luckily, Pokemon at level 14 have such shitty moves, and that's what bailed me out in this one. Cranidos also turned out to be faster than me, but luckily he used Leer instead of any attacking move, and thus I was able to get a free Bubble off. And this is the point where you're all gonna hate me, because after just catching Budew, I was already gonna sack it. I didn't want to take the risk of dying in one hit because of the Leer, and I figured it would be best to switch out Piplup and reset its stats that way, but that meant sacking Budew and taking my first casualty. I sent this level 4 beast in, and this dumbass used Leer again. I was pretty confused by that because one Leer would be more than enough to KO my Piplup, but the AI does what the AI does. Then Roark proved he really didn't want to win this battle, because I pressed Absorb and he used Leer for the 3rd time in a row. So you can't tell me a sack Budew, he actually did something, he used Absorb. Then I pressed another Absorb, and for the 4th time in a row, he used Leer. I wish I would have just stayed in with Piplup, because at this point I would have already KO'd him. But now I was just waiting for him to attack my Budew. And then it finally happened. Budew got headbutted to the graveyard. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Then it was time for Piplup to finish the job. Granny used Leer again, because apparently he really likes that move. My bubble slowed him down, and the next turn I was faster because of it. And thus, after a really weird gym battle, I obtained my first badge. Then it was time to move on to Floaroma Town, which turned out to be Starly's playground, and I was able to grind quite a few levels. Oh, and in the meantime I also caught a Geodude to use as HM slave, so... just so you know. Then, one thing before I arrived at Valley Windworks, where I had to do a bunch of shit, I leveled Piplup up to a Primplup because the stat boost was something I really needed at this point. After this we went to Valley Windworks, where we had to battle a few Team Galactic members, and their leader as well. Oh, and in case you're wondering why my Starly keeps going up in levels, but it hasn't evolved into a Staravia yet, is because I wanted to keep it as Starly for a while, because Starly learns Aerial Ace at level 25, and if I were to evolve it to a Staravia, it would learn Aerial Ace at level 28. And because of my PP restriction, I was kind of scared of not making level 28 without running out of it. Then we got to the Team Galactic admin. Her first Pokemon was a level 14 Zubat, and I already had trouble defeating this without taking any damage, because this Zubat had the most annoying moves in the world. But then, when I finally got through with enough HP, she revealed her second Pokemon, Purugly. I wasn't even gonna try this, I knew both my Piplup and my Starly would be one-shot immediately. And I needed to come up with a new plan, because this really wasn't gonna cut it. I tried training my Primplup to level 18 and failed. I tried putting honey on a tree and waiting for 12 hours to get a Pokemon to come out of it, and failed. Then, a few days later, I figured out the solution. I was allowed to catch a Pokemon next to Valley Windworks, and luckily enough there was a Shallows. And I know, this seems really weird, why would I need that against a Purugly? Well, you're about to find out. I trained Shallows from level 7 to level 13, and it learned Mud Bump in the process. And this particular move is exactly what was gonna save me against Purugly. Because my Primplup was level 18, 2 Metal Claws were more than enough to deal with the level 14 Zubat. And then it was finally time to let my plan come to fruition. I sent in Shallows and she sent in Purugly. I used a single Mud Bump and I was lucky enough to get an accuracy drop. After this Purugly KO'd me, but this was more than worth it. I sent in Primplup and that was able to tank 2 feint attacks, using 2 Metal Claws in between, one of which was a crit. Purugly KO'd Primplup shortly after, but I knew this was more than enough and this was it. I sent in Starly and Purugly missed thanks to Shallows, after which a Wing Attack and a Quick Attack were enough to finish it off. This battle cost me 2 Pokemon and a lot of effort and thinking hours, but at least I was finally past this point. Then we arrived at the Aterna Forest, and this is exactly what I was talking about in my intro. You meet up with this chick called Cheryl or Cheryl, and you need to guide her to the end of the forest. But after every battle she heals your Pokemon to full health, which was a big problem because my Starly had already used PP and had already lost some health. On top of that, there's at least one unavoidable battle in this forest and thus my Starly would be healed up to full health. But this was pretty easy to solve because after getting out of the forest I brought Starly's HP down to the correct amount and the same for its PP, counting the moves I used in Aterna Forest as well. And trust me, doing this took me 2 fucking hours, so don't ever say I'm not dedicated to making these videos, okay? Oh, and by the way, in Aterna Forest I caught a Banary to use as HM slave as well. Not that anyone cares, but here you go. Then it was time to take on the Aterna City gym. On my way to Aterna City, and by battling the trainers in this actual gym, Starly had leveled up to level 21. At this point it had almost outlived its usefulness, because it only had 13 tackles, 5 quick attacks and 8 wing attacks left. Because of taking almost no damage on its way though, it went up from 7 HP to 21 HP, which was almost full health at this point. So I felt pretty confident about defeating this gym on my first try. Her Cherubi didn't stand a single wing attack, and her Turtwig just about survived a single one. It brought me down to 4 HP, but I wanted to see how much I could do against her final Pokemon. I forgot her final Pokemon was a Roserade, and Roserades are fast as fuck. It outsped me and immediately KO'd me with Grass Knot. After a lot of thinking, I threw my entire tactic out of the window and I decided to evolve Starly, despite it not learning Aerial Ace yet. I was pretty bummed by this, but I didn't really have any other option and I really wanted to defeat this gym because it would open up more routes and thus more Pokemon to catch anyway. After evolving Starly to Staravia, I came back to her at level 22. This time Turtwig didn't stand a chance either, because evolving significantly boosts your stats, and thus I went up against a Roserade with 30 HP. It still outsped me, but after taking a little bit of damage from Poison Sting and Grass Knot, I was able to KO it in 2 wing attacks. And thus I obtained my second gym badge, and the only Pokemon I had at this point was a 14 HP, level 23 Staravia with almost all of its moves gone. After this it was time to once again take on a Team Galactic admin. This was once again gonna be difficult as hell, so I decided to catch a Machop in Mount Cornered, and just for the future I got a Ponyta west of Aterna City. Training options are really limited, because you can't really go anywhere after the second gym, if you haven't defeated Team Galactic yet. Because of this, my training session didn't last very long, and my Ponyta and Machop only gained a couple of levels when I challenged Commander Jupiter. Jupiter's first Pokemon was a Zubat, and I sent in Staravia. Because of battling the grunts in this building, Staravia was down to 1 HP, and thus I wasn't allowed a single mistake at this point. Staravia used its second to last wing attack, and it was able to instantly KO the Zubat. But then Jupiter sent out their biggest threat, Skuntank. I really didn't know how to tackle this Skuntank, and thus I sent out my Ponyta to do some initial damage. And it was similar to the situation with Roark. Low level Pokemon have shitty moves. And thus Skuntank used 3 Screechers and 2 Smoke Screens on its first 5 turns, and I was able to get plenty of tackles in. Then I switched to Machop, and after 2 more turns of screeching, he was finally done with my bullshit and he instantly KO'd it with a Night Slash. I figured Skuntank was down at low enough health to make my Staravia useful for one last time. I used Staravia's final wing attack and I got lucky enough to get a crit. And once again, and you're gonna be hearing this a lot, this battle took me fucking forever to get done, okay? At this point Staravia ran out of wing attacks and was pretty much useless, so I decided to train Ponyta a bit, and at level 16 it finally learned a useful move, Amber. Then on Route 208 I decided to catch a Bibarel, because my next location was Hardhome City, and when you try to leave there's an unavoidable battle with your rival there, and at this point I really had nothing, because I ran out of wing attacks. I didn't actually film this, but in Hardhome City I was dumb enough to run through Pal Park and make a save. This meant my Pokemon were back to full health and I had to do the entire Starly thing again. And if you thought 2 hours with Starly was long, this was way longer, man. I had to do this with 3 Pokemon and it was so fucking annoying. Okay, I'm sorry about that nerd rage. Anyway, it was time to battle our rival in Hardhome City. And I know the choice of catching Bibarel was probably confusing to you, but I had a valid reason for this. Bibarel was actually gonna carry me through this rival battle, and it was because of one single move. Rollout. I knew this dumbass was gonna start with Starly, and he wasn't gonna be able to do anything against my Bibarel. On top of that, Rollout was super effective against this Starly, and thus I could already build up a bit of power to take care of the rest of his team later on. On my first rollout, Starly used Double Team, and I was able to take it down for free. After this, I 3-shot his Grotto with him using 2 withdrawals in between for some reason, I 2-shot his Buizel, and I 1-hit KO'd Ponyta. Does my choice of catching Bibarel make sense to you now? It surely does to me, he carried this entire fucking battle. After this, I moved on to Fieldstone City. Fieldstone City has a fighting type gym, and thus I caught a Kadabra on Route 215. And when I say I caught a Kadabra, I mean I caught a Kadabra which has a really low catch rate, a 15% appear rate, and is the hardest pain in the ass to catch. And this alone once again took me 4 fucking hours. To make things worse, I wasn't able to get past these 2 idiots, so I had to train my Kadabra a level to learn Psybeam, then I had to forcefully catch a Geodude on Route 210 to go boom against this guy's Kadabra. Otherwise I wouldn't even be able to get to Fieldstone City in the first place. Then we finally arrived at the fighting type gym and I was able to level Kadabra up to level 28, at which it learned Reflect. I felt pretty confident about this gym battle, and after easily taking down Maylene's Meditite and Machoke, I didn't even do half HP damage to Lucario and it completely obliterated me. However, I knew exactly what to do in order to win this battle. I reloaded my save and went in again. Once again I KO'd Meditite, but then I wanted to do something different against Machoke. My plan was to use Reflect on Machoke, and then I would be able to tank a hit from Lucario. I used Reflect and I was lucky enough that Machoke used Foresight. After this I once again one-shot Machoke and it was time for Lucario, but this time I had Reflect up. I used the Psybeam and I was indeed able to survive a Drain Punch, even though it was just by 1 HP. After this I used another Psybeam, and surprise surprise, I was able to get a Confusion off of this. Lucario hit itself in Confusion, and then my third Psybeam was more than enough to get it down. And because of this incredible luck, after only 2 tries I had already obtained my third gym badge. The route towards Pastoria City wasn't interesting at all, except for the fact that I caught a Girafarig. When I reached Pastoria City, I immediately went into the Safari Zone because I needed a Bibarel from there to once again defeat my rival and also use it against Wake, the 4th gym leader. The highest possible encounter level of a Bibarel is level 25 in the Safari Zone, and I considered this not high enough. So both inside the gym and to the left of Pastoria City, I trained my Bibarel to level 29. Up until this point I already had to reset quite a bit, but this battle against Wake was the real challenge for my mental health. In this battle I tried a bunch of different things. I tried setting up Reflect with Kadabra, I tried rollouting with Bibarel, etc, etc, but none of it seemed to work. Whatever I did, this Gyarados just kept killing me without me being able to damage him at all really. But after literal days of resetting, I finally got the battle I wanted. I started off with Kadabra and used its final Psybeam, and it confused the Gyarados. On top of that, he immediately hit himself in confusion and I was able to get a Reflect off. Even though he killed my Kadabra afterwards, this was exactly what I needed. I sent in Bibarel and started using Rollout. But Rollout wasn't strong enough to kill Gyarados in one hit, and thus Wake used the Super Potion. This didn't really matter though, because my Rollout was strong enough to kill him afterwards. Then Wake sent out a Quagsire and I sent in Girafarig, which I had already trained up to level 29 at this point. My first 2 stomps flinched him, and I was able to KO him without taking a single point of damage. But then he sent out his final Pokemon, which was also his biggest threat, Floatzel. As you've probably noticed, Reflect was still active, and that's exactly why I used it at the start of this battle, because this Floatzel would KO my ass any day of the week. I used another stomp with Girafarig and it flinched once again, making it 3 times in a row. I was able to get one more stomp and the Psybeam off before Floatzel finally KO'd me. At this point Floatzel was low health and my Bibarel was easily able to finish it off. Then I had to do the whole Mesprit, Azelf and Uxie thing, but before being able to do that, our rival wanted to battle again. And like I said, I caught Bibarel for this as well, because once again I exploited him sending Starly out first by using Rollout and slaying his entire team. Then we did the whole plot developing thing where we moved to Celestic Town and meet up with Team Galactic member. And honestly, getting there was quite the struggle because there are a few unavoidable battles and I had to reset a bunch of times. But other than that, I didn't even bother to catch any Pokemon, because I already knew what Pokemon I wanted to catch next to defeat the 5th gym. Which brings me to my next location, Trophy Garden. Pikachu appears at Trophy Garden and I really wanted to use this because it learns Thunderbolt at level 26. I was lucky enough to get it at a mild nature, but its moveset was absolute dog shit. After grabbing the EXP share and spending way too much time training this fucking mouse to level 21, I was already done with it. I used my Explorer Kit and grabbed the Thunderstone. I picked up the rare candy on Route 207. I grabbed the choice packs from this guy in Celestic Town. And last but not least, I finally utilized the move relearner in Pastoria City. Now Pikachu finally had a decent attacking move and I was able to easily level it up to level 26, at which it learned Thunderbolt. Then I evolved it to a Raichu and plowed through Fantina's gym. I was only level 30 at this point, but I figured my choice packs would be more than enough to give me this win. Fantina's first Pokemon is Drifblim, and of course my Specs Thunderbolt immediately one-shot it. Next up was Gengar. Gengar is lightning fast and it outsped me, and Shadow Claw brought me down to 36 HP. However, my Thunderbolt did a lot of damage, and on the turn after, in which she used the Hyper Potion, my Thunderbolt actually got a crit and I moved on to her final Pokemon, Mismagius. This ghost also outsped me and it used Magical Leaf, bringing me down to 6 HP. However, I got super lucky and Thunderbolt paralyzed it. It kinda sucked that this Mismagius had the Citrus Berry, and thus my second Thunderbolt wouldn't be able to KO it. But this battle was the luckiest one in a while, and after paralyzing Mismagius in the previous turn, I actually critted in this turn. And thus my level 30 Raichu obtained me my 5th gym badge. This is the amount of luck I need to actually get my badges. It fucking sucked, okay? Then it was time to move to Canalave City. Canalave. Whatever. On Route 218 we caught the first iteration of what I'm going to be calling
Hentai Man.
This way, Rule 34 still gets a little bit of a spotlight in this video. After this, I obtained both the rare candy on Route 218 and the Mystic Water in Pastoria City, and I started digging for more hard skills because I wanted to give Hentai Man some more moves. If you hadn't noticed at this point, the move relearner desires hard skills, and that's exactly how I gave Thundershock to my Pikachu. While Pesmi is digging his ass off, it's time for a quick intermission. I know what you're here for these Pokemon challenges and they get a fuck ton of views. But what if I told you I made more content than just Pokemon challenges? The reactions to these videos are overly positive, and if you like my way of making videos, if you like my way of editing, then give my other videos a shot. I do pretty much everything. I do GTA, I do Watch Dogs, I do Pokémon Showdown, I make random videos about gaming topics. All of them get nowhere near as many views as these Pokémon challenges, but if you like this video, if you like my challenges, be sure to check them out. You will not be disappointed. And with that, the intermission is over. After digging for hard skills, I noticed Tentacool didn't have any great moves, and thus I evolved it to a Tentacruel. After this, I gave the movie learner a hard skill to get acid on my Tentacruel. And then I went to Celestic Town to obtain the Wise Glasses, since they also boost my special attack a bit and it doesn't lock me into a move just like Choice Specs. Then we arrived at Canalave City and we were challenged by a rival once again. And this is exactly why I gave my Tentacruel acid in the first place. Before the fight, I gave Destroy Red the Wise Glasses and I gave Hentai Man the Choice Specs, because I desperately needed Hentai Man to have a big special attack stat in this battle. My rival led off with a Staravia, and my Destroy Red was able to finish it off with a single Thunderbolt. After this, it was time for our local superhero, Hentai Man. The power of Hentai was able to destroy his Ponyta and Heracross with ease, even though it took damage from Brick Break in between. Then it was time for his Growlithe, and because my Hentai Man was locked into Bubble Beam, I decided to just sack 5+6 Slay, because he had done his job at this point anyway. Then I once again sent in Hentai Man and hit him with a Choice Specs Acid. He was able to get a Mega Drain off, but it didn't do much damage, and then I KO'd him easily afterwards. Then he only had a Buizel left, and of course my Destroy Red was able to one-shot KO this. And I'm not gonna lie, the further into the game I got, the easier the rival fights became. If you're fighting against him, that is. More on that later. Gym number 6 pretty much meant 3 levels for me, because Tentacruel was able to one-shot pretty much every Pokemon. This gym fight was honestly super easy because of my Choice Specs Hentai Man. I'm gonna keep repeating his name throughout this video, so get used to it. Anyway, 2 Bubble Beams were enough to finish off his Bronzor, even though he used a Confuse Ray in between. And then he sent out his Bastiodon. Even though this took a little bit longer because Bubble Beam didn't KO and he used a potion, Bastiodon really wasn't any trouble at all, and about 3 Bubble Beams was enough to get the job done. And then we arrived at the biggest joke of this fight, Steelix. And when I say biggest joke, I don't necessarily mean he is a joke, because he was still able to get me down to 5 HP, but he wasn't able to survive a single Bubble Beam. And this was one of the very few fights I got first try in this run. Then, before doing anything else, I caught a Stunky on Route 221. This is simply because it learns Flamethrower and Night Slash, and I was pretty sure I was gonna need both of those moves in future battles. Then blah blah blah, plot development, dead Kadabra, dead Toxicroak, dead Bronzor, and that took a little bit of damage. Then blah blah blah, more plot development, different lake, dead Golbat, dead Bronzor, and it's him! It's him! Except this time, 2 Night Slashes were more than enough to KO it, even though I needed a crit in the process. Then we moved on to Snowpoint City, and on the way I caught the Snover and the Medicham. The Medicham is pretty obvious, it's for the Ice-type gym, and why I caught the Snover, that's something I will explain way later in this run. Before doing anything, I dug up some more hard skills and gave Snover some proper moves, and then it was already time for a next gym fight. And honestly, this gym fight was pretty fucking annoying. Candice led off with a Snover, and I led off with my freshly caught Medicham. Snover is pretty weak and Medicham was easily able to one-shot it, especially due to its ability, Pure Power. And yes, I called Medicham Huge Power just to fuck with you guys. Next up, Candice made the questionable decision to send out the Bombasnow, and High Jump Kick easily took care of it. This Medicham is the reason this battle was so annoying. I had to reset this battle numerous times because I had no idea how to defeat this Medicham without taking any casualties. It either used Bulk Up and I wasn't able to KO it at all, or it used an attacking move and everything just died instantly. And then I made a very rough decision. I decided to sack the first iteration of Hentai Man. I know, it's not what I wanted either, but I needed to at this point. After bringing it down to half HP, it was done. Hentai Man got KO'd. This is so sad. Alexa, play Despacito. I hate that meme, just so you know. Anyway, after this I sent in my own Medicham, and it was able to KO the remainder of this piece of shit easily. Then all Candice had left was a level 38 Sneasel. It sliced my ass down to 48 HP, but then I was able to force palm it to death, and obtain my 7th gym badge. On the way to Snowpoint City there were a couple of unavoidable battles, and my Skuntank was down to 5 HP. And on top of that my Medicham only had 48 HP left. Both of them were very underleveled and weren't the fastest Pokemon, so this would 100% bring some problems in the rest of the run. Now I understand you might be a little confused. As you might recall, earlier in this run I had a Raichu and you've never seen it properly die. Well, that's because it didn't. I needed a few HM slaves from Mountain Corneret and I put Raichu in a box because I didn't really need it. But my dumbass forgot that Raichu would be healed up to full HP and full PP. Considering it had only 5 HP left and almost all of its moves were gone, I was not gonna bother putting in all the effort to bring it down to the correct HP and correct PP. So long story short, I just considered it dead. Anyway, I went underground for hard scales again and decided to give Medicham Ice Punch to at least have some variety in its moves. Then it was time for some more plot development because we had to defeat Cyrus. This battle wasn't even worth mentioning because Medicham easily took care of his Murkrow, his Golbat and his Sneasel. But after that I had to defeat another admin. The only positive thing about this was that Team Skull could be used for one more time because Kadabra couldn't hit it and Night Slash won it KO'd. And then Medicham took care of his final 2 pokes, even though his Toxicroak brought it down to 2 HP. Then it was time to climb the Mount Corneret to get rid of Team Galactic once and for all. After defeating a couple of Galactic grunts, I realized all of my problems. Medicham had 2 HP and ran out of moves, and Team Skull had 5 HP and ran out of moves as well. So I was pretty much working with
Nothing.
I left Mountain Corneret, started digging for more hard scales and taught Medicham Thunder Punch and Fire Punch. And then it was time for the most annoying part of this entire run. And I'm not gonna lie, I almost rage quit at this part. Here, at Spear Pillar, you have to defeat these 2 admins. And once you defeat them, you also have to defeat Cyrus once again, making it 2 fights in a row and you're not able to save in between. That's already bad enough, but it got worse. Once you talk to these 2 admins, your idiot ass rival friend comes to join you and help you in this battle. So it's a 2v2 and you can't control half of your side. At this point your rival has really decent Pokemon. He has a Ponyta with Fire Blast and a Staraptor with Close Combat for example. And then you're probably like, well, that's not too bad, those are really good moves and stuff and you can probably defeat them easily. Hell no. This guy leads off with his Munchlax and that's not a problem on itself. It has Body Slam and it can do really good damage even against these Bronzors. But what does this guy do every single time? He uses Stockpile once, then he uses Stockpile twice, then he uses Stockpile for the 3rd time, and then, no, he does not attack, he uses Swallow. And thus I'm battling 2 Bronzors by myself while he's doing nothing, and I keep losing HP and I keep dying. The amount of times I tried this battle before realizing this guy is the biggest idiot in the world is at a number that even Einstein would be scared of. I kept dying over and over again and thus I needed a new plan. I decided it was a good idea to go to Lake Equity and catch a Psyduck to later evolve to Golduck. Golduck has great speed stats and great special attack stats, and thus choice spexing that guy would probably get me through the battle easier. I taught it Confusion and gave it one of the rare candies I collected, after which it learned Zen Headbutt. I went back to Spear Pillar and lost again. And again. And again. And 500 times more. Until I finally got through. Golduck was the only Pokemon that survived at very low HP, but I wanted to try Cyrus regardless. However, I totally forgot something that happened after this fight. Just like in Aterna Forest, your Pokemon get healed to full health, and thus I had to bring my Pokemon down to the correct HP and correct PP after this battle once again. Not that it mattered though, Cyrus sent out his Honchkrow first, and not only did the game send out the wrong Pokemon, which was my dead Medicham, but Honchkrow would 100% outspeed my Golduck as well. And thus, technically, I whited out. This current team of weak idiots wasn't gonna cut it either, and it was time for the 2nd iteration of Hentai Man, which I caught at Route 220. And yes, I know I teach an HM move to Hentai Man here, but I really wanted to use all 5 Pokemon I was allowed to use at this point, and thus I sacrificed a move slot just to have all 5 with me. If I didn't do this, I needed to take another HM slave with me, and then I had to battle with 4 Pokemon instead of 5. So I hope you understand, and it's not cheating because I'm not gonna be using the move anyway, it just limits me to 3 moves instead of 4. After this, there was one more thing I needed to do. I went to Snowpoint City and fought some of the trainers I skipped earlier. And I simply did this because I wanted to evolve Snover to Abomasnow. And at this point you might be like, huh? But Snover hasn't done anything yet, he hasn't gotten any experience. Well, that's not true, I just haven't shown it on screen. As soon as I caught Snover, I gave it the experience share, and every battle you've seen on screen so far, he gained experience. He was level 37 at this point and I only needed one more level to evolve him, and I was gonna desperately need his ass against Honchkrow. Then we went back to Spear Pillar and the fight with our rival went way better than last time. I actually got out of the fight with 4 Pokemon. At this point, Huge Power and Derp basically had no health left and no PP left as well, and I really didn't want to bring them down to the correct amount of HP and PP after these fights. So to sum up what I just said, I was gonna sack them against Cyrus. Once again, I was up against Cyrus's Honchkrow. He was dumb enough to use Embargo on his first turn, which allowed me to get 2 Thunder Punches off, with Cyrus using a Super Potion in between. After this, Honchkrow easily took care of Medicham, but Medicham had already done his job at this point, especially since Honchkrow outsped him. Then I sent in the second iteration of Hentai Man and easily Water Pulsed his ass to death. Then he sent in a Gyarados and I actually got super lucky against this guy. My first Water Pulse got both a crit and a confusion, and after this it just became one big shit show. Gyarados was able to hit me with an Ice Fang, but it also hit itself twice, and in combination with my poison jabs it was enough to finish it off. Next up was his Weavile, and once again I got super lucky. I used the Water Pulse and it confused. After which Weavile hit itself twice, and in combination with my poison jabs I was able to finish it off without taking too much damage. His final Pokemon was Crobat, and it was finally time for Abomasnow's first appearance. Crobat was dumb enough to use weak moves such as Confuse Ray and Bite, and thus Abomasnow was able to finish it off, but it did take 50% health damage in the process. And now I can already hear you thinking, those Water Pulse crits and confuses, there's no way he actually got that on his first try. And you're correct. Remember when I said the double battle was easy this time? I lied. I got through the double battle numerous times, but I kept losing to Cyrus, and when I lost to Cyrus I had to reset to before the double battle once again. I wanted to make it seem like it was very easy, but after looking at the footage I just can't make that sound believable. This part of the run is very much the reason as to why it took so long to make this video. I spent 2 full weeks on this battle, about 3 to 4 hours a day, and I still wasn't able to get it done. I'm almost as far as saying this was worse than the blame battle in my Sunkern challenge. I really am. Anyway, after this it was time to challenge Dialga. And I thought it was super obvious that I wasn't gonna catch any legendaries in this run, and thus I didn't really make it an official rule. But whether you like it or not, here's footage of me running from Dialga, and it never appearing ever again. Then, on my way to Goldenrod City, I caught a Gastrodon because I once again needed Mud Bomb for the 8th gym. And then it was already time for our next fight because nothing significant happened in between. Before challenging the final gym, I caught the 3rd iteration of Hentai Man, because the 2nd iteration almost outlived its usefulness. There's a couple of unavoidable trainers in Faulkner's gym, and my Gastrodon was already taken down to half HP. But even then, resetting this battle only took me a couple of hours. After a bunch of resets, I finally got what I wanted. Faulkner started with a Raichu, and I obviously started with my Gastrodon to counter it. Raichu wasn't able to KO me in one Brick Break, and after that I finally got the Mud Bomb crit I was waiting for. His second Pokemon was Octillery, and the 2nd iteration of Hentai Man took this time to shine for one final time. He used the Poison Jab and it poisoned Octillery, after which it Octazookaed my beloved tentacle friend to death. Then it was time for his big brother to finish it off, and 2 Poison Jabs did the job, even though I needed to tank a Charge Beam in between. Then he sent out Luxray, and I sent out Dur, because if you hadn't noticed yet, I didn't sack it against Cyrus. I used a single Water Pulse which did more than enough, and Luxray immediately KO'd me after. After that, the 3rd iteration of Hentai Man was easily able to finish it off with a Poison Jab. Then Faulkner sent out his final Pokemon, and once again I wonder why they gave it this set. On its first turn it used Nasty Plot, which it doesn't need because it's a physical attacker. On its second turn it used Agility, which it also doesn't need because it's really fast. Then, on its 3rd turn it actually used something useful, Shockwave, which damaged me to 13 HP, but after that a Poison Jab was able to finish it off. And even though my team got weakened quite a bit and it wasn't the best possible outcome, I was surprised this outcome only took me a few hours of resetting. Then there was only one thing left to do, the Pokémon League. Victory Road wasn't that interesting, except for the fact that this bitch ass Gyarados KO'd my Gastrodon. Then it was time to do a little bit of preparation. I was allowed to catch a Pokemon in Victory Road, and Victory Road had just the Pokemon I needed at this point. If you go down a floor in Victory Road, you can encounter a level 50 Golbat, which was perfect to deal with like half of the Elite Four's Pokemon. And just before the Pokemon League, I also caught the fourth and final form of our local superhero, Hentai Man. After that, I went back and forth to the move relearner to teach them new moves, empty all of them in battle and give them levels that way. And during those battles, Hentai Man learned Hydro Pump, Golbat learned Air Slash, and Abomasnow learned Blizzard. Then last but not least, I collected all the rare candies I didn't pick up in this run yet. After which I ended up with a level 56 Abomasnow, a level 58 Golbat, and a level 56 Hentai Man version 4. And yes, I know your rival challenges you just before entering the Pokemon League, but this battle was so goddamn easy that I'm not even gonna give it any attention. Then it was time for what was supposed to be the climax of this run, the Pokemon League. But I hate to disappoint you, the first part of this Pokemon League is the biggest anti-climax you've ever seen. The first member of the Elite Four was Aaron, and this is exactly why I caught Golbat. And I'm not gonna lie, this battle was an absolute joke. Golbat was able to Air Slash Dustox, Beautifly, Vespiquen, if I even pronounced that correctly, and Heracross without losing any health. The only Pokemon that did a little bit of damage was Drapion, but that was simply because Air Slash wasn't super effective on it, since it had Poison Dark type. This absolute joke of a battle literally took me 5 minutes, and it was already time to move on to the next one. The next member of the Elite Four was the Ground type trainer, Bertha. I literally can't pronounce this name, it just sounds like I'm saying birth as in giving birth. Since this is a Ground type trainer and I have both an Ice Grass type and a Water type, it might not surprise you that this battle also was an absolute joke. Abomasnow was able to Razor Leaf Quagsire and Whiscash to death without taking a single point of damage, and Hentai Man took care of Sudowoodo, Hippowdon and Golem. And yes, it did take a little bit of damage, but in this fight the weather damaged my Hentai Man more than my actual enemies, which is actually pathetic. After two of the easiest fights of this entire run, we arrived at the third Elite Four member, Flint. This battle was also incredibly easy, but I'm gonna dissect this just to show you guys what I'm dealing with here. Flint's first Pokemon is a Rapidash, and on its first turn it did outspeed my Hentai Man. But it used Solar Beam without Sun, and thus I basically got a free kill with my Spexed Hydro Pump. His second Pokemon was Lopunny, which isn't a bad Pokemon at all. But just check the moveset on this Lopunny. Who at Game Freak thought giving it this moveset was a good idea? Like this is a beginner moveset. This isn't an Elite Four member moveset at all. Thanks to this absolute trash moveset and Lopunny using Mirror Coat on my poison jabs, I was able to KO it without taking a single point of damage. Then it was time for Infernape, and you're probably like, oh, Infernape, that's a really good Pokemon, it's gonna outspeed his entire team, this is gonna be difficult. Nope. I pressed Air Slash, and it used Mach Punch, doing no damage at all. Then the turn after, you would think he learned from his mistakes. Nope, he uses Mach Punch again, and I was easily able to two-shot him with Air Slash. Next up was his Steelix, and okay, I admit, I got a little bit lucky, I got a crit. Then it was time for his final Pokemon, Drifblim. Drifblim is faster than my Abomasnow, and it would be able to get an attack off. But instead, it decided to use Will-O-Wisp, and I was immediately able to kill it with a Blizzard. Do you see what my point is now when I say it's an anti-climax? These are the moves these Elite Four members use, like, the hell is this? At this point, it was already time for our final Elite Four member, Lucien. Lucien is a Psychic type trainer, and I figured he would be a big problem, since my only real attacking move against Psychic types was Bite from Golbat, which is honestly pretty weak. However, his first Pokemon was Mr. Mime, and thanks to Cerebi, I knew I could exploit this moveset. I knew one of Mr. Mime's moves was Light Screen, and that wouldn't affect my bites at all. After that, my plan was to bank on either a flinch from Bite or a crit to finish it off. However, things didn't go as planned. After resetting a couple of times, I used a Poison Fang, and Mr. Mime used Reflect. I decided to just keep going because...
why the hell not?
And my second bite actually crit him, knocking him out in the process. After this, according to my recording, the battle only took 5 more minutes. His second Pokemon was Alakazam, and Alakazam is a really good Pokemon if utilized right. This fucking dumbass made Alakazam use Energy Ball twice in a row, and I was able to get a Screech off and bite him to death afterwards. Next up was Girafarig. Mr. Mime's Reflect was gone at this point, and 2 bites were enough to finish it off, even though he Shadow Balled my ass to 9 HP in the meantime. Then it was time for the biggest threat of this entire battle and maybe even the entire Pokemon League, and I was honestly really scared to battle this. Bronzong. But once again something happened that's gonna undermine my entire statement about the Pokemon League being easy this time. I used the Specs Hydro Pump and I crit him on my first try. I know, it's lucky, it undermines my statement, but come on. Then it was time for his final Pokemon, Medicham, and 2 Air Slashes were easily able to finish it off. And that's that, the Elite Four defeated without taking any casualties, and honestly, I did it pretty quickly. But the run wasn't over yet, there was one more fight left to go. The fight that many consider the hardest champion fight in any of the Pokemon games. The battle against Cynthia. I knew Cynthia would lead off with a Spiritomb, and my Abomasnow was the perfect counter to it. A Specs Blizzard wasn't enough to KO it, but luckily Spiritomb used Embargo and I took 0 damage. Not that it really mattered, because even if I did take some damage, I still would have had plenty to finish this battle. A second Blizzard was more than enough to KO it, and we moved on to her second Pokemon, Lucario. Lucario was exactly why I was conservative with using Hydro Pump in my previous battles. Hydro Pump was pretty much the only way to KO this Lucario, and if I didn't get a crit, I'd have to reset the entire battle. This is simply because Lucario is super fast, and most of his moves KO'd me in either 1 shot or 2 shots, so I would never be able to get a second Hydro Pump off. Because of this unfortunate fact, Lucario made me reset the entire battle a few times, but at some point I finally got what I wanted. Lucario used a singular Dragon Pulse and brought me down to 31 HP, and I got the Hydro Pump crit I was desperately waiting for. With pretty much the biggest threat out of the way, it was time for her Garchomp. I completely forgot about Spiritomb's ability, Pressure, which made me use 2 Blizzards instead of 1 every time I hit it, and thus I ran out of Blizzard PP. Luckily an Icy Wind and an Ice Shard were more than enough to get the job done, but because of this piece of shit Ghost, I needed to take an Earthquake to the face. Next up was Roserade, and I knew it would outspeed my Abomasnow by a long shot. Luckily, I already had a plan for this, because I knew my Golbat would be faster than Roserade. I was able to get a single Air Slash off before Roserade KO'd me with Extra Sensory, but it didn't really matter to me because I figured Abomasnow would be able to finish it off. I sent in Abomasnow and my expectations were indeed correct. Ice Shard was more than enough to finish it off and we were getting close to the end. 2 more Pokemon left and they were both Abomasnow's job. Her second to last Pokemon was Gastrodon, and to make life a little easier I sent in Hentai Man to get a little bit of damage off before being inevitably KO'd. A single Hydro Pump did nearly half HP damage, and then Hentai Man was KO'd. This was it, Abomasnow versus everybody. Gastrodon is slow as shit, and even though I was 3 levels lower, I was easily able to get a Razor Leaf off and KO it instantly. And then it was time for the final 1v1 versus Milotic. Milotic is a very bulky Pokemon, and there was no way Razor Leaf was gonna KO this. I really thought I didn't stand a chance, and I also really didn't want to reset the battle, because so far I had pretty much the best possible outcome, and this situation wouldn't be better, and I very likely wouldn't be going up against this Milotic with more than a single Pokemon. However, there was one thing I completely forgot. Before coming up with this run, I already looked at the Pokemon League and checked what Pokemon were used by all Elite Four members, and I checked what Pokemon were used by Cynthia. Back then, I did read that Milotic had the move Mirror Coat and I was able to exploit it, but I was honestly very surprised to see it in this battle. I used a Razor Leaf and Milotic used Mirror Coat, and obviously it failed. I used another Razor Leaf, and once again, Milotic used Mirror Coat. Milotic was in the red at this point and thus Cynthia used a full restore, and of course I used another Razor Leaf. On my 4th Razor Leaf, the game was like, I'm tired of this stupid trainer AI that's using Mirror Coat all the time. Here you go, man. Here's the crit that's gonna make you beat the entire run. I defeated Cynthia, but I really wasn't proud of this. Milotic was faster than my Abomasnow and literally any attacking move would have ended it. Why did it use Mirror Coat 2 times in a row? I have no idea. What a goddamn anticlimax. But yeah, that's gonna do it. I completely owned this run. I've proven that it's possible to come up with ridiculous Nuzlocke runs and still beat the game. And you know what the funny thing is? I literally only mapped the end game. Pretty much everything you've seen up until the league was mapped on the go. And that is exactly why I made some minor mistakes. This could be done way more efficiently, but my end game was planned all along. The Pokemon League is exactly why I got Abomasnow, because I knew I was gonna need it against Cynthia, and the same for Golbat and Hentai Man version 4. And as you have seen, even though I got a little bit lucky, the Pokemon League went exactly as planned and my mapping actually made sense. But like I said, this run can be done way more efficiently. But hey, mapping on the go made this run more fun. Like at some point I was left with 2 Pokemon with a combined 7 HP. That's way better than boring ass content. Then the second point I want to make is that I didn't do any aimed EV training in this run. What I mean by that is not training for a specific stat, for example defeating 252 attack EV Pokémon. My Archon run taught me that Pokémon get really overpowered when doing that, and it just seemed really boring to me. I didn't want to make it an official rule because I figured the run might not be possible without doing that, but in hindsight I really should have made that a rule. Then the second to last point I want to make is that you're likely wondering how I did a certain amount of damage in a certain situation, and that is simply because I collected some items for it. I just didn't want to name them all because that would make this very long video even longer, and on top of that it would make the video really annoying to watch because I'm constantly saying what items my Pokemon have. Like for example, Gastrodon had a soft scent against the 8th gym, and in the same fight I gave my Hentai a poison barb to boost its poison jabs. Then, the final thing I want to say before I let y'all click away, is that there's some loose ends here. After editing this entire video and watching it, I noticed I never really said anything about the death of Ponyta and the death of Staravia. And you know what the dumbest thing is? I don't have their deaths recorded. I have no idea when they died or how they died. I don't have it recorded, it was a while ago. I literally have no idea what happened to them. They just randomly disappeared out of my footage. So yeah, all I can really say is...
I'm sorry, I'm not perfect.
Anyway, I hope you liked this video, and if you did, then definitely leave a like rating. If you liked even more, then definitely hit that subscribe button. And of course, I'd love to see you in the next Pokemon challenge. I'm gonna outro this video to Rich and Jobless by Cyrus and Marcus Ryan. Cyrus is a Michigan hip-hop artist, and I've been a fan of him for about 5 years right now, and his music just really resonates with me. And the last couple of months, his music really helped me through a lot of rough days. If you are into hip-hop, and even if you're not into hip-hop, if you just appreciate musical art, then please give this guy's work a shot. He has records where he spits fire bars such as Boardman Gets Paid and No Competition, but he also has super wholesome music such as I'm Alright, I'm Good and I Hate You But I'm Fine. I put all of his socials down in the description, and honestly, he deserves the views and the attention way more than I will ever do.
Never was a confident dude, but then I checked the mirror, never mind, man, I'm good. I ain't caught up in the trends, I'm never catching the flu, cause I'm already sick with it, the fuck I need you. Y'all too busy contemplating what some people saying. Did you read the line? I think he meant it another way. Is everything this complicated? Maybe shit just is the way it is and you just basic so you make it complicated. Built some walls this morning for practice. I just like to burn them shits to ashes. I just like to swing my mallet and bust a nut sometimes and watch a song become a classic.